Preparing. Got it. Okay, good deal. Looks like we are now on YouTube. So, everybody at home, hello again. This is Eli, the computer guy. We're doing another office hours with a guest host because everybody says I'm like the most arrogant person on the entire planet. I keep trying to explain. I go out and talk with other people and just relay what they say. So I figure if I bring people on, then they can destroy your dreams. And I don't know. So how you doing, Marty?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing pretty good, pretty good. So, I guess we'll just dive into it. So, you are a managed service provider up in the Yukon, right?
That is right. We are, you bet.
You are. So, okay, so for the folks at home, give us an idea of like what does your company look like? When you say you're a managed service provider, like kind of what is the size of your company? What do your clients look like? That type of thing.
Yep. So, I mean, we generally have, we're a little bit short staffed right now, but we generally have a staff complement of 12. We're basically an IT service provider that does everything. So, we do manage services, we fix computers, fix servers, deploy Wi-Fi, deploy public Wi-Fi, IP phone systems, video surveillance systems. Pretty much anything technology related, we do it. We also do websites, web app development. Yeah, anything technology related, we do it.
That's interesting. So how do you pick your the services that you do though, then if you do so many things, how do you figure out, we're going to do digital surveillance, we're going to do public Wi-Fi, that type of deal?
It's pretty much what people have asked for. We've this is kind of a catchphrase at this point in time, but I mean, we talk about the convergence of technology. And I mean, honestly, an IP phone system isn't really that much different from an IP surveillance system for video at this point. They all communicate over Ethernet. They all talk over LANs. So, I mean, it just makes sense to do. It's what clients want, right? Clients like a one-stop shop. So they call us when they want video cameras. They call us when they want another phone. They call us when their printer doesn't work. So yeah, our clients like that.
Yeah, fair enough. So, okay, so you said 12 employees. How long have you been around for then?
11 years, just over 11 years at this point.
Really? Okay. And how did you decide to become a managed service provider? So that'll be somewhere around 2009, 2000. Actually, ironically, then when I was deciding this was a bad business to get into, you got into it. So what got you into it back then?
Actually, the company started as a website development company. We were
Okay.
called Iditarod Designs back then. And so we threw out a bunch of, it was unaddressed ad mail, so basically flyers in the mail that go to businesses. And we got a call from what ended up being our first client, who is still our client. So it's our longest running client, asking, okay, I don't really need a website, but can you work on servers? Because they were at that time unhappy with their current provider. Sure, I guess. I mean, we can fix printers and servers and whatever, sure. And kind of, yeah, just snowballed out from there. So realized that quite frankly, here the market's not that huge, let's say, for websites. It is something that we do, and we still do it for a number of clients. But just how we grew is we grew in kind of that IT service provider space.
Oh, that's cool. So yeah, so you're in the Yukon. That sounds so cool. And you're in Whitehorse, right?
Yes, yeah, we service the entire Yukon, but yeah, I live in Whitehorse. That's where we're based out of.
Okay, so like how big is what? Like when we're talking about town size, like what
Yep.
what what are we looking at?
It's a town of 30,000. Now that sounds small. You got to realize we're also a capital city. We're the largest city within I don't know, let's say 1,000 mile radius. So we have services and amenities and things that you wouldn't normally see in that size of city. So yeah, we definitely have. It's a little bit larger. It's probably the equivalent if you were talking about, let's say, a city in a state. It's probably the equivalent of about 100,000. That's kind of the market size, let's say.
Okay. So then, like, what's your radius? Like, will you drive an hour? Will you drive 5 hours? Like, how far around will you service things?
Our we have a number of clients in a place called Dawson City. That is a 5.5 hour drive one way from here. That's easy because it's road access. We also have some clients in some fly-in only communities. So you've got to take an airplane. It's probably about 5 hours on an airplane to get there. Then you're stuck there till the plane leaves. So for the return flight, so yes, we do have that. Yeah.
Wow. How do you? Holy crap! I remember when I used to look in Baltimore, and the decision about whether we go like 30 minutes or 45 minutes was that like, oh, I don't know if I want to go that far. How in the hell do you make the decision to go 5 hours or get on a plane to go one way?
I mean, clients pay, right? I mean, you're talking about towns and areas where they don't have any other choice. They're used to this. If a commercial fridge breaks, they fly somebody from Whitehorse to come and fix it. Like that's just normal. It's just a cost of doing business for them. So they're very used to that. All of our clients are used to that. For most of our clients who are in kind of these more remote areas, like we don't go there all the time. We will go there a few times a year, usually on a scheduled visit. And then, yeah, I mean, most of the stuff's remote, right? I mean, remote support is something, I mean, it's been around for a while, but I mean, especially with the C-19 situation, that's, I think exploded a bit. And I mean, the efficiency you get from being able to remote in and screen share with somebody and fix whatever their issue is. I mean, you really only have to go on site for physical things, like physically plug in a printer, right? Outside of that, you can do everything remotely. And that's, I mean, we've been doing that for years.
Interesting. How did you figure out the pricing strategy for that? Are you a maintenance contract, time and material? Because I know once we started implementing remote, we had a problem of just billing the customer. Because when you only spend 5 minutes on site, but you had to go there, they hand over an hour's worth of work or money. But if you spend 5 minutes remoting in, they're like, why am I spending? I should pay you $15 or something idiotic. How do you figure that one out?
So we're a bit unique. And I mean, for anybody who's part of, the Facebook groups, the IT business owners, Facebook groups, there's a number of them. You'll see me pretty active in those. So we're a little bit unique, and this is just my personal opinion and what's worked for us. We work on an hourly rate. So all of our services, managed services included, it's all on an hourly rate. Managed services to me is just basically the way I explain it to clients, because they don't really understand what managed services are, or IT service. They don't realize, they don't understand the acronyms that we use. Managed services is nothing more than being proactive, right? So it's doing work proactively to make sure you get ahead of things before they break. That's really all it is in the end. We can spin it and do marketing spin, whatever we want, but that's the gist of it. In that sense, so we just bill an hourly rate. We don't have flat rate billing. We don't have ACE, the all you can eat model, any of that. We just bill hourly. We have a set hourly rates. It's actually the cheapest in the industry here. Whether it's on site, whether it's remote, whether it's travel time on an airplane, it's just an hourly rate. Of course, what happens when something's only 5 minutes, especially if you're doing it remotely. So in our hourly rate, everything's rounded to the nearest hour. That being said, all of our techs are given a degree of autonomy and leeway. They can decide whether something should be billed or not. If they reset a password and it took 90 seconds, they'll put a ticket in, but they won't bill against it. They won't bill an hour against it. That's kind of silly. We've got a very good trust relationship with all of our clients. They trust us that we're not going to bill them stupidly, for lack of a better term. And that's it. That's kind of how it works.
Interesting. So when you're flying out to clients or driving 5 hours, are these some kind of specialist clients? Is there a reason they have to be that far out from humanity? Is it like logging operations, or are these just towns that happen to literally be in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, I mean, these are just smaller towns. Like, we service quite a few municipalities. So it's the city level of government. And again, there's no one local there. They don't, Dawson City has a permanent population of somewhere around 2,500. It balloons in the summer. It grows about twice as big or so. In normal years, they'll have tens of thousands of visitors, right? Because it's a tourist spot, right? So, a lot of people go through there, but there's not a lot of permanent folks that live there, especially through the winter. A lot of folks leave. So in that sense, they don't really have a lot of capacity locally. They can't hire somebody, so they have to outsource it. So that's when they come to someone like us, right, who offers that service. And, at least we offer it locally within the Yukon. A number of municipalities and other forms of government, that kind of thing, like they've used folks all the way down from Vancouver, right? So that's a 2-hour flight to get from Vancouver to Whitehorse. And things have been outsourced down in more metropolitan areas like that. So better to keep it in the Yukon or closer. if you have a major failure and somebody's in Vancouver, it's a while to get up there, right? That's a bit of downtime.
Yeah, wow. So do you have competition there? Like, is somebody breathing down your neck, or are you guys the only ones around?
No, we're not a monopoly. I don't want to be a monopoly. There's pluses and minuses certainly to that, but no, I don't want to be a monopoly. I like having choice. I like clients. I think it's important that clients have a choice and feel like they have a choice. They don't have to use us. We're not the only show in town. Feel free to go and try somebody else if you want. There are a few providers. There's one kind of larger provider that's kind of our size. And then there's a handful of smaller ones, a lot of one-person shows, that kind of thing. I would prefer to have a degree of competition for sure.
That's it. But you said it's like 30,000 people in your town?
Yep.
Is that so? How much there's just only so many computers to repair. I mean, how much competition do you think you could have? Do you think another person could open a 10-person shop and still be successful?
I don't know if there's space for a 10-person shop, another one. There's probably space for another smaller operation of 2 or 3 techs for sure. I don't know if there's space for a 10-person shop again. There, like I said, there's a disproportionate amount of businesses and groups out there. Like we have a very high proportion of NGOs. So these are organizations that are funded by the government, but they're not private sector, but they don't work under a government. I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's a lot of them. Compared to other jurisdictions, we basically have twice as many, at least, compared to other jurisdictions. And government's a huge part of the economy up here. You've got, across the territory, they probably eat up 25 to 30% of the workforce works for government. So, it's a little bit of a different situation. That's why I say if you're trying to compare, look at something, think of us like the size of 100,000 or so. That's kind of where the economy sits, even if the population's not there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. So then how did you decide on Whitehorse, the Yukon? Why? Since you're pretty successful, I'm sure if you had gone down to Vancouver, you would have been even more successful down there. Why be up there?
I used to live in Vancouver, actually just outside of Vancouver when I was younger. How did I wind up in the Yukon? I followed a girl. No, literally, that's how I wound up here, with the intention to hang out and this is a common Yukon story. Wages in the Yukon are higher than they are down south generally, and that's part of the reason for that is because it's a more isolated place. Your winter's harsher, et cetera, right? So my intention was to stay here for a season, make some money, save some cash, then leave again. That was in 2003. I kind of haven't left since. So, that's how I wound up here and kind of never left.
That's cool. So when we think about down here, when we think about the Yukon, we think about polar bears and incredible amounts of snow. And do you have snow yet? Is it actually that bad there, or is that just
we don't have snow yet. Hold on a sec.
But you are looking outside, okay?
Outside.
Okay, no snow yet.
So there's no snow yet. It's not warm. It was, what was it this morning? +4 degrees. So that's, 40 degrees Fahrenheit or so. So it's getting colder for sure. No, we don't have any polar bears. It's actually most of Yukon's covered by forest. It's actually a pretty temperate environment. Most people think of us like what you see in the Eastern Arctic, where there's no trees, flat barren land, wind just howls 24/7. That's more in the eastern part, which when I first got here, I thought it was more like that too. And then I got here and I'm like, it's a lot of trees. I mean, there's snow for sure, but it's not a crazy amount. Like it's not more than you would see in some northern U.S. states, right? So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So then what is your growth plan? So you've got 12 employees and you've been trucking along for a few years. Because I know at one point you were talking about actually trying to expand into another city.
We
Whatever
do.
happened with that? Oh,
We do actually. We have an office on Vancouver Island in a city called Nanaimo, which is about 100,000 population. So we do have a satellite office there. We opened that in February of 2020, which was not a very good time.
oh,
It was
wow,
fine to start with, but then, yeah, that didn't work out so well. Anyways, we do have a handful of clients there. There's actually a few clients from the Yukon that have offices there. It's one of the reasons we chose that particular city, just to be able to service them better as well. And kind of when we rolled into a new market, we would already have some built-in clients kind of thing. So yeah, we've operated that office. We still have it. I go down back and forth. I've flown since the pandemic started. I've flown, I lost count, but it's something like 26 times since the pandemic started. So if anybody wants to ask me what flying is like these days, it is actually a lot better right now than it was 6 months ago. I will say that, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, that hasn't grown as quickly as we wanted it to, but that's all right. I mean, that just is what it is, right? So yeah, so we do have an office down there.
That's interesting. So do you plan to scale? So if you're at 12 people with 2 places, I mean, do you see getting to 50 or 100 people with 5 places, or are you happy with where you're at?
It's a good question. I mean, you've said this over the years many times. Staff, yeah, staff. um, Part of having an office in Nanaimo, like the part of the challenge here in the Yukon, again, is workforce, right? So we generally have an unemployment rate of like, it's low. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's significantly lower than our national unemployment rate. We have more jobs than we have a workforce. So finding new staff is very, very hard here. To give you context, I could put a job ad out right now for $25 an hour for a level 1 help desk tech, and I will get 0 resumes from locals. They will all come from overseas, UAE, Saudi Arabia, India, Pakistan. Generally, those are the areas where I get resumes from. I will get 0 locally because we just don't have the workforce. So part of the idea of having the office in Nanaimo is there's a larger workforce there, larger labor pool. And what we could do is we could hire somebody to work in that office and do remote work for us up here while also handling stuff down there. So that was kind of the idea. And then that person could also fly up, spend a week here, whatever, go back down. Obviously that got kind of derailed by C-19 and because we had for a long period of time, we had isolation requirements. So if you flew in from outside the Yukon, whether you were a Yukoner or not, a resident or not, you had to isolate for 2 weeks. So yeah, so that happened to me once. The first time I came back, I had to isolate for 2 weeks. Then they made exemptions for specific key sectors for essential workers, essentially. So I didn't have to, but I could only go to work. I couldn't go anywhere else. Couldn't go to a restaurant, couldn't go grocery shopping, nothing. I was allowed to go from home to work and back. That was it. So yeah, anyways, that's the idea, was to access an available labor pool down there that could help support up here as well. Because like I said, normally we have 12 staff. I don't have 12 staff. We've got 10 right now, but we've got positions open. Hopefully actually one is filled next week. I should have somebody new starting. I did find somebody who moved here recently, so we'll see.
So then, So then what, if I can ask, so what do you have to pay to bring somebody on? Like what's the low end of what it costs to hire somebody?
I mean, to grab somebody, we're a little bit unique in how we approach this too. I would say 90% of the employees we've brought on over the years don't have any experience. They don't have any paper credentials, and they don't really have a lot of experience, if any, in the IT space. Most of them are going to be hobbyists and people who are interested. What we look for is we look for people who have the right attitude. You can't change attitude. So we want somebody who's interested in the industry, wants to learn, and is willing to put in some effort. So we'll hire people. Generally, what we do is we'll interview, like we'll glance over resumes, right, to make sure that they kind of seem like a fit. Then we'll interview. If we like the person in the interview, we'll offer them a position. Everybody starts at minimum wage for the first 30 days. And it's kind of a trial period. So we get to know them, they get to know us, we get to kind of see what they know, what they actually know, what they can do, what they can't do. After 30 days, we revisit their wage. We say, okay, look, this is where you're at. This is how much, I think is fair. Here's how you can grow from there, right? So whether that be education, certifications, whatever it is, and their wage goes up. Basically, wages go up with what they bring out of the table, right? So the more they're able to do, the less help they need from somebody who's more senior, the higher their wage goes. So realistically, most staff will sit around $20 an hour once they complete the 30 days. I do have staff close to $40 an hour. And these, to be clear, these are staff that really don't have any certs. They're not university educated in IT, and they didn't come with any certifications. If they have any, which some do, it's something we put them through. So yeah, there's definitely a big range for wages. We are competing, obviously, like I said, government is the largest employer here. So we are competing with wages from them. I can tell you on average, their wages will be somewhere between $32 and $40 an hour for an IT tech, for level 1 IT tech. That's what we're competing against. Yeah.
So, like in your since you are a different country and it's a Yukon, just to try to put this into context, like what would a starter house there cost, like a rancher house? Do you have any idea?
I mean, that's changed in the last 12 months because of the pandemic. So, it's not, what would it normally be? You're probably looking at 400,000 for a house, for a single family home.
Holy crap, normally?
300,000 for a condo. I mean, that's pretty normal, right? I mean, you try to buy a condo in Vancouver, it's $1 million minimum, right? I mean, you can't buy a condo. A house that is, they just sold a house in Vancouver a few weeks ago. It's a standard size lot, so it's just a single family home lot. The house was burned in a fire, so it had to be knocked down. Like you couldn't reno it, like there was no saving it. It has to be knocked down, and it sold for 1.7 million. So you paid 1.7 million, you got a piece of property with a burned out house you have to knock down and rebuild. So in comparison, it's not too bad here.
That's interesting. Are you guys complaining about housing? Because here in the U.S., we're losing our crap over housing prices, and I think we might be better than you guys are. Like, is that a complaint up there?
Yes, housing costs are spiraling. I mean, part of it's a function of interest rates and such, right? I mean, I've been saying this to everybody for a long time. Nobody cares what the price of a house actually costs. The only thing someone cares about is how much is this out of my account every month. Okay, it's $2,000. Okay, I make $4,000. I'm okay with that, right? That's all anybody cares about. Nobody cares about what the actual price costs, because quite frankly, I would venture to say 80% of people don't understand how much the interest is costing them on their mortgage over the life of a mortgage. They would probably lose their minds if they actually understood how much they pay the bank in the end. They'd probably lose their minds. But yeah, so that's, I mean, and again, that's a function of where wages are at, right? I mean, public sector wages, if you're a husband and wife and you both work for the government, I mean, you're a $140,000 household roughly. So, I mean, a function of that is, yeah, I mean, okay, a house is, 300, 400K, whatever. It's not really that bad of a deal.
Interesting. So with your employees then, so you get them with no certifications, you get them up to maybe $40 an hour. Is there a reasonable place for them to go? Can they grow in their careers past you reasonably?
They will wind up, realistically, most will wind up going to government if they stay in the industry. That's where most of them end up. We have had staff who have moved on to government roles. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had. I'm not sure if we've actually lost somebody to this specifically, but I know that government has approached staff of ours before to try and recruit them. Again, function of the labor market. You know, we are the largest provider. We train all these techs, so they're ready to do the job when government wants them, right? So, yeah.
Do you see that as a manager? Do you have any problems with? Because I know as a manager, one of the problems you can have is if one of your techs is actually too smart and too disciplined, you run into the problem of you just can't give them enough to keep their mind doing what they want to do. Have you run into any of that problems, or you actually have employees that are too good, but there's no place for them to go?
In general, no. I'm going to say no. We have one employee. They're actually our longest running employee. They were the second employee we ever hired, who are still with us today. That person is our main web a developer and web app developer. So that person really likes to code, and that's what they kind of wanted to get into. And they also do kind of the higher level, I'll say the tier 3, let's say, troubleshooting and administration kind of stuff. So they don't really do I mean, it's not that they don't, but their role is not primarily come and fix my printer, or my Outlook doesn't work or whatever. They will do that, of course, but yeah, that staff member does more of the web-based stuff and programming, databasing, things like that.
Okay. And then, so as you've grown, how have you learned to become a manager? Did you have managerial skills before you started this? Like, how did you figure out how to actually manage people? And
Yeah, not a ton when I started out. I mean, this isn't my first business. I mean, I used to own an automotive detail shop for a number of years. So it's, business itself is not new to me. Managing techs is interesting because it's different than managing other staff. A lot of techs have certain personality quirks, let's call it, that makes them different than other staff. When you look in larger companies that have an IT department, for example, or something like that, or even within government, if they have their own in-house IT, you often find that there's kind of, the IT department's not that well loved, let's put it that way. And it's not because they don't do their jobs or whatever, but it's personality conflicts and just how they act and react to things. And I mean, it's definitely unique, right? How you approach something that needs to be corrected, let's say, with an IT staffer might not necessarily be the same way you would do it with someone else, right? In a different kind of position. So yeah, I mean, there's been a learning curve for sure. We're probably a bit unique in our space too. We pretty much leave our techs alone. They schedule with clients and they balance their workload and all. As long as the work's getting done, and as long as clients are happy, we don't really care that much, right? As long as they're working. So we give that kind of degree of autonomy, which works for the most part. I mean, it's not to say there's never any issues or anything. I mean, you work through those as they come. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't been too bad for sure.
okay. Do you put much time and energy into like the concept of HR? I know here we have like an ADP, a payroll processor, where you can actually just outsource your HR. So if there's a sexual harassment complaint, you just call our HR department. And do you deal with any of that, or you don't feel like?
No, we have HR policies. Obviously, we got a big manual of HR policies, but I mean, it's all common sense stuff. Again, it's for us, we We really focus on getting the right team, and the team members have to like each other, right? So everybody right now, the group that we have is really good. They work really well with each other and they all like each other. That's really important. In my opinion, it's more important than hiring somebody who's got a bunch of certs, but is a jerk. That just doesn't work. They have to work with the team. They have to be happy working with each other, right? So yeah, no, we do have a good crew right now. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And then I think one of the things that I find quirky about you, maybe it's not still this way, but again, I think about the Yukon, I think about polar bears, I think about snowdrifts, and apparently your company cars are smart cars. Is this still the case?
Mostly smart cars. So in March of 2019, we purchased an electric car. We have a Nissan Leaf. And then in March of this year, we bought another one. So we have 2 Nissan Leafs, and then the rest are smart cars. Yes.
Do the Leafs get more than 10 miles? Like I thought cold weather was just brutal for electric vehicles.
So we have first generation Leafs, the bottom used. They're actually from California, both of them originally. Very good price. So we got a 2013 and a 2015 Leaf. They get about, hang on, got to do the mile to kilometer conversion. Roughly, let's see here, about 90 miles to a charge, roughly.
Really? Even up there in the middle of winter?
So that's in summer. It's 90 miles to a charge. We lose about 20% range in the deep cold, and deep cold, I'm talking minus 40. We don't get that much. We used to get a lot more minus 40 degrees. Just for reference, minus 45 is where the Fahrenheit and Celsius scales meet. So that gives everybody an idea in the US. We used to get more days or even weeks on end of that in the past. We don't get that as much anymore. In 2019, the winter of 2019, we didn't see it at all. The coldest we got was about minus 30. 2020, we got a few days of minus 40, but we're not getting as much of that anymore. Climate change is real. The North sees it a lot more than what you'd see in the South. We get a lot more rain in the summer, and we don't get as cold in the winter. Our shoulder seasons are also longer than they used to be. So I've seen this change from 2003. The coldest I've ever seen was with the wind chill minus 64. And that hasn't happened in over a decade. That was ridiculous. The gas in my tank froze in the car, and I couldn't get the car started that day. I just went back inside. Forget that. That's ridiculous. But yes, it's you lose about 20%, roughly about 20, maybe 25%. The newer EVs are much better. They don't lose as much. But yes, that's kind of what you lose.
So, as a climate change believer, I can understand you getting the Leaf, but why this? Because smart cars actually are not inexpensive. It seems like you could have gotten a Ford Escape or something that seems more "quote unquote" reasonable for the Yukon. Like, why did you go for smart cars?
Smarts are cheap used. These cars are cheap used. I can buy, when I bought our first Smart. So, okay, this would have been in, 2012. We bought our first smart car. It was a 2009, and it had 20,000 kilometers on it, which is about 12,000 miles. Yeah, about 12,000 miles. And it was $6,000.
What?
So this was a nearly new car for $6,000. The depreciation on those is ridiculous. Brand new, that car is about 25,000. But it just tanks. It just tanks when it's used. So we bought that because it's cheap on gas. It was cheap to buy. And quite frankly, it was unique. It was more the uniqueness of the vehicle. If you look on our website, if everybody looks on our website, you'll see a counter of a lot of our solutions are energy saving. We don't deploy massive servers that eat a bunch of electricity because, quite frankly, electricity in the Yukon is more expensive than it is down south. So a lot of things that we've actually sold because, well, you know what, even just the electricity savings from this over the next 3 years will pay for itself. So the return on investments, it's kind of a funny argument that not a lot of people think about, but you can actually get a return on investment just from the power savings. So kind of to match with that to kind of support, how we approach that and what our kind of philosophy is. We needed to get cars that kind of push that as well, right? So yeah, smart cars it was, and now I won't buy any more. It'll all be electric at this point.
Okay. Do you like the Nissan Leaf, or would you go for a different one if you had the option?
It's horribly ugly. It's horribly ugly from the outside. And that was on purpose. People wouldn't buy them. That being said, the inside's very nice. The trunk is super low because there's no gas tank. So the trunk is lower than most cars than you would expect. So you can actually shove a lot of stuff into there. I haven't had to transport anything yet that I couldn't fit inside the Leaf. It's a good car. I mean, I'm happy with it. A lot of people, when you talk about electric vehicles, most people's mind goes to, I don't buy gas anymore, which is the cost savings. It's not actually true. That the cost savings, at least in the commercial world, is there's zero maintenance on them. I mean, we've put, between the two of them, we've put roughly 60,000 miles, I'll say, probably a little bit more, 70,000 miles between the two of them combined. And again, the earlier one we bought in March of 2019. And this is how much we've spent on maintenance. Nothing. The only thing we've purchased is we have the tire swap twice a year because the first one came with summer and winter tires. I don't normally do that. I just buy winters and drive them all year round. But yeah, so we pay for tire rotations twice a year. That's it. No oil changes, no air filters, no spark plugs. No, the car's broken. Okay, the shop's going to take a week to fix it. That car's gone for a week. None of that. Just runs every single day. Duty cycle is every single day.
So do you have a Nissan dealership there? If they do break down, what do you have to do to get it fixed?
Yes, we do have a Nissan dealer. I'm not sure if they work on the EVs. They didn't used to, and I know there was a fight with some other Leaf owners here about them working on it. Honestly, at this point, like for that first one from 2019, I don't care. If it broke next week and was just useless and had to be thrown in the garbage, it's fine. I mean, we've gotten our money out of it. The duty cycle it's achieved has paid for itself. So, I mean, obviously I care. I don't want to throw it out, but from a dollar's perspective, it's paid for itself. It's no problem. Generally, like with the smarts, we need to get 6 months out of them. If we can get 6 months out of our smart, it's basically paid for itself, and it's not a loss at that point.
Holy crap. Yeah, I can just see, Louis Rossman and doing the Mac repair stuff. I can see him having a heart attack at the idea of disposable cars. I just got to the end, I just threw the damn thing away, got another one.
That's what I'm going to do with smarts at this point. I mean, if a smart needs a major fix, like a $500,000 fix, not going to fix it. I'm going to sell it to somebody as a parts car, or somebody who's inclined to fix it, go for it. And I'm just going to buy an electric because the reliability is off the charts. I mean, and I wouldn't have thought that when we bought our first one. I mean, I would have thought, it's the gas savings. It's not the gas savings. It's the maintenance. It's not having any kind of downtime. It's not having to drive to the automotive shop, wait in line, drop off the keys. Okay, when's it going to be ready? Okay, get somebody to pick me up, bring me back to the office. Okay, 3 hours later, they call, it's ready. Get somebody to drive me over there again. I mean, it's just gone. You don't have to deal with that, right?
That's cool. So when you get those, though, being up there, do you literally just order them online and they ship them? Or does your dealership up there have a couple on the lot or whatever?
No. So I'm buying them used. So there's a used electric car dealer out of Calgary, Alberta. It's the largest one in Western Canada. So I buy from them, and then they ship them up. So they put them on a transport truck and they get shipped up.
Okay, you just trust that the quality is going to be good enough. You don't buy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I've driven the Nissan Leaf. I've driven the Kia Soul EV. I've driven the Smart EV because there is an electric Smart. They didn't make many of them, but it does exist. I've driven the e-Golf. There's another one I'm forgetting that I've driven as well. I have driven the new Mach-E Mustang. A friend of mine owns a brand new one. They bought it this year. And I have to say, every EV pretty much drives the same. Some are faster, some are slower, but how they drive is exactly the same. I mean, it's just an electric motor that moves wheels, right? So there's nothing really to try out. It's very interesting because when I drive, because I drive the EV every day, right? When I go back to a gas car, I mean, I personally own a gas car. When I drive the gas car, it's actually a lot harder to drive. You don't realize this until you've driven an EV for a while. And it's because, I mean, with a gas car, you have gears that change, you have RPMs, you have to know, when do I have to step on the gas? How much do I have to step on the gas to pass this person? If you're on the highway, like, what gears are going to drop into when I floor the gas pedal. I mean, there's no transmission in an EV. It's just one gear, right? So it just goes. It's a lot easier to drive, and you don't realize it until you actually do it. So, yeah.
Interesting. So with all the prices and things, that's an interesting thing to talk about, because I know a number of years ago we were talking, and I was questioning how the hell you were staying in business as like basically doing computer repairs. And you said like shipping cost to the Yukon was idiotic. I think you showed me where it cost like $40 to get a hard drive shipped to you. Is it still that bad?
Let me pull up something. You'll like this because I was mad about this actually. So I had to buy, I ended up buying some servers from ServerMonkey. So I bought two 1U rack servers, Dell rack servers from ServerMonkey. Because we need them for a very specific project. Okay. The subtotal for both of those servers was $1,070. Okay, for both servers. Like that's the servers, right? That's the servers. Okay. And then shipping and handling was $836.76. And that took 3 weeks to get here. 3 weeks FedEx ground. Yeah,
$800 for shipping.
$836.76. I'm looking at it right now.
Holy wow!
And that's totally normal. Like that one kind of annoyed me, but I didn't really blink too much at that.
So it is still, because I remember like we were having that conversation, and I was saying, well, something about repairing a computer or buying a new one. And yeah, you said like for a Dell, like to ship a Dell was like $200, and that was just like
I think we were looking at we looked on Newegg. I remember this. We looked on Newegg at a hard drive, a 3.5-inch platter hard drive, and the hard drive, it was a Western Digital we looked at. It was like $60 for the drive, and then it was another $40 to ship it. Which it's pretty normal.
And God bless Canadians. You guys aren't losing your mind. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, how does e-commerce even work for you folks?
Yeah, we're just used to paying more for things like that. Like, we definitely get hosed on shipping for sure, just in general. And not just here. That's anywhere in Canada. Like, you pay more. Americans pay a lot less for shipping goods than Canadians do. And we just kind of accept it, I guess.
Accept it.
This is what it is.
Do you know, like, as a business person, do you understand why? I mean, that it's just so much different, just so much higher. Do you grasp why it is? Or
to some extent, we're just getting ripped by these companies. Honestly, why does a new car cost? And I mean, these are real figures, right? So somebody looked at a Honda Civic. This was 6-7 years ago, right? Honda Civic in Vancouver cost X amount of dollars. And this is adjusted for the currency exchange rate, of course. A Honda Civic in Vancouver cost $7,000 more than the exact same Honda Civic across the border in Seattle. To be clear, that's like an hour drive between the two cities. Yeah. Why? I mean, the question was posed to the car manufacturers, and they just kind of went, because we're willing to pay more, basically. That's just how it is. I mean, you go to Europe, they pay even more. Yeah. Is what it is. It's just what they accept.
Wow. Because it's like, I understand, like when I go to Canada and I spend more for gas or something because you have different environmental laws. But when you're just talking about basic shipping, I mean, I can understand like a little bit more, but holy crap.
No, yeah, I mean, even gas, we do have a little more tax on gas, but I mean, hang on, let's see here. Let's see if we can find a liters to gallons conversion. Okay, so 1 liter of gas. So actually, hang on. gallons to liters. Dollars to liters. Okay, so right now I am paying for basic regular unleaded gasoline $5.63 Canadian, which is $4.40 US. That's what it costs for a gallon of gas here. Right? Which is a lot more than what Americans pay. And it's just a function of what we pay.
It's interesting. You bring up the whole money and the currency conversions. How much does this affect you? Like, since the U.S. is so big and close to you for parts and all of that, how much do you think about currency conversions when you're going to be buying supplies? Do you stockpile supplies at certain times and then do you hoard things, or do you just
generally, like, we'll keep some things that we use all the time in stock regularly, but most things are special. Like, everything's ordered as needed. Computers, laptops, servers, whatever. It's all ordered as needed. Probably half the stuff comes from Canada, half of it comes from the US. Just is what it is. Our pricing will be based on what it actually ends up costing us, because you got to remember, it's not only currency conversion, which, by the way, the bank always seems to have a less favorable currency conversion rate than Google does. I'm just saying. But the bank also charges fees, right? So the bank will also charge like 1.5% or whatever it is, currency conversion fees for buying in a different currency. So I don't look too much on that. I just, okay, this is how much it wound up costing my credit card in Canadian dollars. And then I bill off of that.
Fair enough. And so, because we talked before about the hardware costs, shipping costs, but then we also had an interesting conversation, because I was asking you about, like, why doesn't everybody go to the cloud there for everything? And you were saying, at least at the time, it was a stupid cap for everybody. Like, it was 100 gig cap, internet cap for like everybody in your area. Is that still the case?
We do have unlimited internet plans now. They're not cheap. Let me pull one up. I will show you in for what our clients in Dawson City, 5 hours from here, pay for internet. Give me a second. I'll pull it up. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely challenges with internet. I mean, we basically have a monopoly ISP, right? Traditional DSL or cable internet comes from a monopoly ISP. Cloud's interesting because some things make sense to put in the cloud. If you're a small office with half a dozen email accounts, yeah, 365, that makes sense. If you're somebody with 100 email accounts, quite frankly, 365 doesn't make a lot of sense. You're going to pay more if you take an average Exchange server, on-premise Exchange server, and you say it's got a 4-year lifespan, that will cost you less than 365. It will probably cost less than half over a 4-year lifespan. I've done these numbers. I've looked at these numbers. I've heard the arguments of, well, but you got to admin that Exchange server. Look, you don't have to do much admin to an Exchange server. They just run. They're pretty bulletproof. They're like an electric car. They just keep going. Yes, you got to put some patching in here and there, but we're talking a handful of hours a year. And then, we've probably got somewhere between 20 and 30 Exchange servers out there in the field. It's probably more, actually, but we have quite a few out there, and I'm telling you, they just run. We've been admitting Exchange for 11 years, and they just run. Like, there's nothing you have to do to them. Every 4 years, you got to upgrade the hardware or replace the hardware, because that just makes sense.
Do you guys get hit by or did your clients get hit by whatever that attack was, the shell?
The Hafnium attack? No, nobody did, and we patched right away. So, cybersecurity is a big thing, and whether you're in the cloud or on premise, you have to pay attention to that stuff. Because a lot of people, like, the dangerous thing about cloud is a lot of people think you don't have to worry about it and do anything about it. But I mean, all it is your physical server is just somewhere else. You still have to administer your physical server.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it doesn't disappear. It just changes where it physically is. That's all. There, I threw up the in the chat. I put a image up. Yeah. For Dsl costs. That is what our clients in Dawson City have to deal with. That is the biggest package you can purchase for standard, regular business internet.
Oh my God, I wish I had. Oh, actually, I guess I can flip this thing around. Yeah, so anybody in the US that is complaining, this is what they're paying for DSL service. $300 a month for 15 meg down, 1 meg up, 1 to 2 devices at a time. Holy crap. God bless America. Jesus. Wow, that is. Your government doesn't. I mean, Christ. I mean, we bitch about our government all the time, and our stuff isn't that freaking bad. Like, do you guys have like municipal internet services? I mean, is there something trying to be done to deal with that, or is it just?
Not really. It's the monopoly provider, right? Elon Musk will be my friend. Okay. I mean, I have my Starlink pre-ordered. I've had it pre-ordered for many months. That will change quite a bit in the internet landscape for Yukoners for sure. That is the first true competitor we will ever have. I just have another one. There's a client who's looking at, so that's just the regular business internet, the DSL kind of stuff. You can go the next level up, which is enterprise internet, fiber optic. So here's a fiber optic connection, 20 megabits a second. You get to choose what the up and down speeds are, but it has to total 20 megs a second, unlimited usage, 5-year contract term. And it costs $37.99 a month.
$3,800.
Yes, a month. Yeah, with a one-time installation fee of $2,640.
Holy crap!
And I have clients that subscribe to this because they don't have a choice. It's the only way for them to get unlimited internet, basically.
Do you guys not have, like, around here we started getting the 4G and the 5G, basically cellular internet service? Do you guys have any of that yet? Is that coming in?
Yeah, Canadians pay among the highest rates in the developed world for cellular service. So like I have a good plan. I'm paying. So my cellular plan, I've got nationwide calling, unlimited text, picture, video messaging, blah, 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 voicemail, call display, all that stuff. And I get 15 gigs of usage a month. And I'm paying $85 a month for that, for one line. And that's actually a really good deal. Most people will be paying more. It's actually a really good deal. And that's me owning my phone. That's not, I subsidized the phone and bought a phone from the provider. That's me bringing my own phone in.
Wow. That's a hell of a thing. Would it be better if you're in Vancouver, or is it just a function of you're up in the no?
No,
really?
No. That's national pricing. That's national pricing. Canadians pay among the highest rates in the world and have for years for cellular service. We just pay out the teeth for it. Because same thing. I mean, we have a triopoly, right? There's 3 main national cellular providers. So there's not a lot of competition, right? And we have, it's funny because in Canada we have rules on and I don't necessarily disagree with this per se, but we have rules in certain industries where, like, if Verizon wanted to show up and start providing service, government has to approve it because they're not 51% Canadian owned. So if it's an international provider that's not majority owned here in Canada, it has to seek regulatory approval. So Verizon can't just start offering service here. AT&T can't just show up. So that's part of the issue.
Interesting. What is that from, do you think? Do you guys dislike foreign companies? Are you worried about us spying on you? Like why?
It's been around a long time. So I mean, I don't think it's necessarily all this digital spying stuff because that's in more recent years. I think that's just a function of protecting the infrastructure, right? I mean, really, when you look at telecommunications, I mean, that's an infrastructure, right? It's no different than an airport. It's no different than a highway. It's a transportation medium. Would you allow, the what's the big interstate on the West Coast? The I-15. Would you allow somebody from Russia to buy the I-15? Probably not, right? Would you allow the airport in New York, JFK? Would you allow somebody from Iran to purchase that and just own it? Probably not. So it makes sense. I understand why you want to protect certain key industries. That being said, then you wind up with this, monopoly, duopoly, whatever. There's a trade-off. How do you deal with that? Well, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. So, okay, so one of the questions that came up that was kind of interesting. So I was going to have you on the show, and I started to look at your bio, and then I went to LinkedIn, and I got very confused because you do not list yourself as the owner of
Correct.
Tangerine Technologies, and you said there's a reason for that. So what is the reason for that?
It's actually a personal reason, and what it is so I'm actually an employee of Tangerine. Tangerine is an incorporated entity, which I am employed by. I receive a salary. Yes, I'm also a shareholder, obviously, but I am actually employed as a salary. I do this because something that's very difficult, and I know this happens in the US as well, because I've talked to people that have this problem. When you are an employee somewhere, when you go to the bank, you want a mortgage, you want a loan, you want to buy a car, whatever you want to do. Bank generally will ask for your last two pay stubs and a letter from your employer that says, yes, this person is employed. Are they full-time, part-time, whatever, and what's their annual wage? It's easy. It's really easy. When you are self-employed, quote unquote self-employed, okay, and you go to the bank and try and get a mortgage, they want 2 years of personal tax returns. They want 2 years of tax returns from the company. Then they want a bunch of other information. Basically a mini business review, essentially. Like, does all of your business income come from one client? Because that's risky. How many clients? One that I've seen is, what do your top 5 clients by revenue represent against the total revenue of the company every year? And honestly, it's kind of nonsense. Basically, if you are self-employed, you're more risky. Even though, quite frankly, if you have a job, you can get fired next week, then you don't have a job. So, for whatever reason, financial institutes, it's a lot harder to get anything out of them when you are self-employed. So for all intents and purposes, I appear to be an employee. And that's how I treat myself, because I'm employed by a corporation. Here you go. So it's been my way of getting around things that are kind of a pain in the ass.
That's how you see so many like startup people or new people in business, and they all want to be like the CEO or the owner or whatever, and you're just like, that's okay.
Doesn't matter. My actual title is I don't throw it on LinkedIn, but what I use as a title every day is I'm the general manager. That's what I do. That's my position. That's what my salary is attached to from the corporation. That's what I am. Owner or not, it's kind of irrelevant. I don't really care. I mean, I've been in the media lots. I've done lots of interviews. I've had industry publications do reviews. That's the photo you put on the placeholder online. That was from Up Here Business, which is a business trade magazine that's put out. And in those situations, I'm generally a cybersecurity expert, because that's primarily what I do. That's how I'm labeled.
No, that's right. So you're talking about like shares, and you have shares. Do you have other investors in the company? Is that how you got funded?
Yes, I do have a business partner. We started it together back in the day. So I do have a business partner as well in it. Yeah.
Do you have any? Don't want to get into it too much because I know that can sometimes be. But like, do you have any advice for people if they're going to get into a business and have an investor or co-founder or whatever?
Establish the rules early on, right? Is this person a silent partner? Is this person an active partner? What is their role? What is your role? And it's somebody you have to get along with. And a lot of people make this mistake. Getting along personally is one thing. Getting along in business is something different. People get kind of weird, I guess, for lack of a better term, when it comes to money. And people treat that a little bit differently than they would, just a personal friendship or whatever. So you got to make sure you're on the same page, right? You can't have one owner who just wants to take all the profits down to the last penny every single month, and another owner who wants to leave at least some of those profits in to grow the business. You have to be on the same page with things. I will say I'm very lucky with that. Me and my business partner get along quite well. We are on the same page with that kind of thing. So it's worked out very well. But yeah, you do have to be careful of that for sure.
And then as you've grown your business, is this something that could be saleable? Have you built it in such a way you could actually just sell it off to somebody else if you two
Yes.
wanted to? Yeah.
Yes. I have had offers, actually. I've had offers. I will certainly entertain them. I've always said to everybody, anything and everything is for sale for the right price. So whenever somebody comes and asks, I will entertain it. Is it, I mean, that's certainly an exit strategy, is to be purchased. I do expect that to happen at some point. That will likely be the exit strategy. If not, that's fine too. Don't have an issue with it either way, but yeah, that's on the table for sure.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. So I was looking at your LinkedIn thing, and yeah, as you say, on LinkedIn, you call yourself, you're self-titled cybersecurity expert and disaster recovery engineer. How do you get those titles?
I have to update it, and I haven't updated it because I'm just waiting a little bit. I took disaster recovery engineer when I finished the disaster recovery engineer certification. So, I mean, I have a number of certifications, right? I have CISO, Certified Information System Security Officer. I have CDRE, Certified Disaster Recovery Engineer. CIHE, Certified Incident Handling Engineer. CP TE, Certified Penetration Testing Engineer. I have CHISP, Certified Health Information System Security Practitioner, which to my understanding, I am the only person operating in private sector in the Yukon that is healthcare information certified. We have a lot of healthcare clients, so I believe I am the only one. And I just recently completed Harvard University's cybersecurity program. So I am just waiting for my certificate, and then I will be throwing that onto LinkedIn. So yes, I've kind of moved into the cybersecurity space. That's just kind of what I've focused on over the years. It's just kind of how it's worked. So yeah, that is kind of what I do.
So how did you pick those particular? Because those don't sound like the quote unquote normal certifications. Like, how did you pick those particular certifications?
I chose them out of interest, I guess. I mean, when I started, this is around the time when, I mean, I know you've got your MCSE, right? That was the gold-plated standard for IT techs back then. If you wanted money, if you wanted job opportunities, you got the MCSE. The other one was Cisco certification, CCNA, and that stuff, right? I was interested in cybersecurity. There still is. The Yukon's behind in cybersecurity for sure. I can't say too much about this, but I can tell you this year, earlier this year, would have been in the winter, a public utility infrastructure in the Yukon was compromised by malicious actors. So, I mean, there's some serious stuff that goes on for sure. I think everybody's behind everywhere, but certainly in the Yukon, we are a little bit behind in cybersecurity. We don't have a lot of qualified folks in cybersecurity. So that's kind of an interest of mine. So I moved into that. So we would have that resource knowledge and skill set within the company. So that's one of my roles within the company here. So yeah, I've just kind of over the years gone and looked at specific coursework and things that I could do that made sense to further that kind of goal. How did I wind up with those specific ones? Well, some of those providers that offered those, they were able to offer the course remotely, or, it just kind of worked, and it just worked. Like I would love to do, what is it called? OSWAP, offensive security, wireless.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a wireless one for Wi-Fi. I'm actually interested in that, but you have to physically attend the course. That's not that easy for me to do, right? I mean, just go down to Seattle. Well, I mean, I've done that, but that's not like, okay, I'll just do that next week, right? It's not that simple. So how I've chosen those kind of courses, some of it at least has been just a function of I've been able to do it remotely, or the timing worked out, or whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So here's a question. Here's a thing to think about. Basically, am I talking out of my butt when I give this advice? So many people that listen to me, everybody wants to go into cybersecurity. Nobody wants to build Active Directory. They all want to do cybersecurity. And one of the warnings that I give is, although we see this in the news, that doesn't mean a lot of companies are actively seeking to pay somebody for this. Like, as somebody who, this is what you do when you have a company, how easy is the cybersecurity sell? Do you actually have people coming to you, or that many people coming to you that really are looking for that?
So, I mean, I actually do, because I'm not too active on LinkedIn per se. Like, I don't post a lot or anything. I do use it, but I do I'm subscribed. I haven't unsubscribed. I should, because I don't really need to see it. But anyways, I do see job ads for cybersecurity professionals. There are jobs out there for this. Large retailers, not Walmart, but like Walmart will ask for these kind of positions. When you look at the job qualifications for these positions, I will say, look, you have to have some cybersecurity training, specific training, the paper credentials. Okay. I mean, having gone through Harvard University's cybersecurity program, was it good? Sure. Did I learn a lot? Yeah. I mean, I would say I learned some, but I mean, not a lot of it is technical in nature. It's more the theory and the policy behind it, right? Like the policy of least privilege, right? So that's the idea of, you give users the least amount of privilege they need to be able to do their job function. That's great, right? That makes sense, of course. How do you do that? What does that actually mean, right? So I think if you want to be a cybersecurity professional, you need to understand your systems. You need to be a systems admin. You have to understand your systems in order to approach a policy of least privilege. You have to know how to do that in your environment. If you have an Active Directory environment, you have to know how to assign a user the least amount of privileges that they need. If you don't know how to do that, it's kind of a moot point if you just understand, the policy of least privilege. So do companies hire cybersecurity professionals? Yes, but they're more system admins that understand cybersecurity, as opposed to all I know is cybersecurity, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I say. But again, I'm an arrogant person crushing people's dreams. So I will let you do that for a little while. So going off onto a little bit different subject, one of the things I love about you is you have great stories, is getting sued. So let's talk about your first one. So the original name of your company, I love how inspirational this is, was Orange. So you were Orange, and then you turned it to Tangerine Technologies. So what happened with Orange? Because I think this is an interesting story.
So Orange Technology, I mean, we've been operating under Orange Technology. I mean, originally the company was fired up as Iditarod Designs because it was a web page development company. That's not what we were doing. So we changed the name. We branded Orange Technology. That ran perfectly fine for a number of years. Then we were contacted by a law firm out of Ontario, out of Toronto, and their client is Orange SA. So Orange SA is a cell phone provider in France. They're one of the largest cell phone providers in Europe. They're just called Orange. I know who they are. I've been to France. and they claim trademark infringement. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And this is an interesting function of what governments do sometimes, and maybe either don't care, don't realize what the implications are. So a number of years ago, Canada signed an agreement called CETA, the Canadian European Trade Agreement. And this is basically a free trade agreement with Europe. And one of the things that's in that agreement, obviously the agreement's like this thick, right? One of the provisions in that agreement is it affords trademark rights to companies in Europe to enforce a trademark in Canada. So if a company has a trademark in Europe and you're using their trademark here in Canada, they can use a Canadian court and sue you over it. So that's kind of how it worked. I did not have a trademark on the name Orange Technology. It didn't seem like that was a necessity at the time. So yeah, they basically said you're infringing on the trademark, change your name. This wasn't unique just to us. They trolled lots of companies. There's one of the, you can look this up, in the province of Ontario, where Toronto is, there's a helicopter medevac provider called Orange. They have the provincial contract for medevacs with helicopters if you have to go from a remote site to a hospital, and they were named Orange and Orange Helicopters, if I remember correctly, and they got the same nonsense. So what they decided to do was drop the A in the name, so their name is actually ORNGE. That's how they got around it. So anyways, these guys trolled a bunch of people in Canada. So I mean, look, it wasn't a big deal. It was interesting because they only cared about the name, they didn't care about the logo. So it really wasn't that hard of a change. We decided at that point because we looked at Tangerine and we're like, somebody must have this already. And nobody did. And we actually registered a trademark under that. After that, we decided, okay, we're not going to play this again. So we registered a trademark. We own the trademark. We are okay to use that now.
Oh, okay. So do you just have a thing about like citrus? It's just funny. Like I did it wrong. You're like, oh, that's kind of, but then you're like orange and then tangerine. Is there something about orange fruits that
I
you
used to
like,
work
or?
for a regional cellular provider. And when it's kind of a long story, but when that cellular provider was that's how I met who my business partner is now. We both worked for a cellular provider. And when they were trying to come up with a name, they wanted to name it, like they had a bunch of things on the table. They ended up calling it Latitude Wireless, but there were things on the table like Melon Wireless and a few other things. And like we were just like, why don't you choose Orange? Orange Wireless sounds good. It's kind of a holdover from that. There's no reason for it. It's easy. It works. The branding worked. The logo is easy to make. We can put it on everything. It's easy to turn your smart car into an orange. Yeah, it's just easy to do.
Oh, fair enough. And then the other one that was even more interesting is you got sued by that monopoly ISP, right? For basically
Yes.
stating your opinion.
Yes. I can't say too much on that, but yes. I mean, keeping in mind, I was an employee of that ISP. That's who owned the cellular provider. Yeah. Can't say too much, but I can't say too much, but I can say it's it's not as simple as, I don't think, my opinion is that it is not as simple as didn't like the comment and sued over the comment. I personally believe there's an element of personal involvement there as well. I did not leave that employment. I don't want to say I didn't leave it in good terms, but yeah, that employment didn't end so well for various reasons. So yeah, that's actually how I wound up starting a business, the detail shop to start with. The automotive detail shop was because I'm not sure if I can work for somebody again, at least in a corporate environment. I just don't have that kind of personality. I don't have that. I'm not a yes man. I can't sit there and let people make bad choices and do things I don't agree with. Let's say what I think is a bad choice without saying something. And some people don't react well to that kind of thing.
Fair enough. Then one of the things I saw of the services that you offer is regulatory compliance service. how do you do that? Like, how do you get into that? I think that sounds like video surveillance is pretty simple. You slap up video cameras. How do you even get into the regulatory compliance service business?
Um, we have like, so we're a little bit different than the US. And this also factors into things like cloud solutions and why we can't use them in certain circumstances. Um, we have regulations. So we have something called HIPAA here in the Yukon. It's the Health Information Protection and Management, no, Health Information Privacy and Management Act. And basically what that is it's a set of rules on how you have to handle data security and privacy for healthcare records. In the US, you have something called HIPAA, HIPAA, right? The Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, I think it is. And they're all very, very similar, but they're also very specific, right? So, for example, in HIPAA, you actually have to, it's written in there, every 2 years, you must test your, I'm paraphrasing, but your security controls, right? You actually have to test them to make sure they work. So we actually do it every year. We do it as an annual for our clients. We have medical clinics and such as clients. So we will test those kind of things every year. So this involves testing, pretend you're a user. What can you access? Can you access things that you shouldn't be able to access? Are your firewalls configured right? Vulnerability testing from the outside, all that kind of stuff, right? So we do all of that for our clients. We were actually involved with the government when they rolled out this legislation because it is newer. It's only a few years old. We were actually involved with them on the rollout of that because we basically provide services to almost all of the medical clinics here in town. So we're kind of we're the guys, right? So we worked with them on that, on developing that. So that's kind of the regulatory compliance. There's also things like PCI compliance, right? So the payment card industry. So if you accept credit cards as a payment method in your business, there's rules on, the requirement of firewalls, the requirement of antivirus, things like that. So we do that as well. And there's also a requirement within PCI that you have to regularly test and audit these things. Another one would be, for example, GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation out of the EU. This applies to EU citizens. Okay, we're not in the EU. Why do we care about it? Well, if you're a hotel that has an EU citizen stay there and you collect their personal information, name, address, phone number, you're responsible for that information. It's covered under GDPR. So if something happens and you lose that data, you've got to disclose that, right? There's rules around that. So there's all kinds of compliance, especially in Canada. PIPEDA, the Personal Information and Protection of Electronic Documents Act. That's a federal piece of legislation. There's requirements in that. There's all this legislation that exists that we have to follow and make sure that our clients follow. So it kind of ties into cybersecurity, right? I mean, it's an arm of cybersecurity, is making sure that you're following all this. And where this really comes into play is insurance, right? So if you're not following the rules that are laid out, if you're not being, as the law quotes it, reasonably due diligent, then what happens is insurance companies say, yeah, you had a data breach and lost stuff. I'm not covering you. You didn't have a firewall. Forget it. Then you're screwed. So that's a real driver for sure, is making sure you're on side with insurance policies, right?
That's right. So are you stamped by the government? How do the people that are hiring you know that you actually know what the hell you're doing?
No, you're not stamped by the government. Such a thing does not exist. Do I wish it existed? Do I wish there was a little more regulation in this space? I actually do. I think there's room to have a little bit of regulation in this space. I mean, you regulate engineers, you regulate dentists, you regulate nurses, you regulate all kinds of industries. You have to have a license to be a barber. There is a licensing program to be a barber. So I think there should be, but there isn't. So honestly, that's where all my education certifications come into play, right? Is my opinion, my professional opinion, that I understand how to comply with the regulations. I I firmly believe we are their provider, the most advanced provider in the Yukon for sure, who understands what the rules are and is able to audit that, if you will. That's my opinion. But yeah, no rubber stamp from the government. Such a thing does not exist.
Really? Because that seems like just a massive. Again, that's why I don't understand what the governments are doing. Is you put this regulation there, but so some 18-year-old kid who knows how to swap a hard drive could theoretically say he audited somebody's system, give them a receipt, and that would be okay for government.
Well, I mean, they might get paid for it. Is it okay in the eyes of the law? That's up to a court to determine, right? So we have an information and privacy commissioner in every province and territory. So we have a relationship with ours. We've talked with ours lots, especially when they rolled out HIPAA for the healthcare industry. We also have a federal one. And these are kind of the bodies that they have the final say, right? Them and the courts basically have final say. So I can give a client a document that says, yes, I believe that you meet the requirements under the obligations, under the regulations. Maybe they don't, right? I mean, if I say that and they don't have a firewall at all, or they don't use endpoint protection, and that's a requirement, and I just say you still comply, it doesn't waive them of any rights or any obligations, right? So it's not like in the end, the person who is responsible, like at least from a healthcare point of view, the person who is responsible is the how do they put it in the legislation? The custodian of the record. So if a health clinic is holding your record, they are a custodian and they are responsible under the law. If I've come in as a third party and said you're following the rules and they're not, they're still responsible. I like that doesn't transfer to me because I said that. So you're right. Any 18-year-old can go and say, yeah, you're fine. Are you? Well, you might find out you're not.
Oh, that's a hell of a thing. Ugh. So, out of curiosity, then, so being a business owner, one of the big problems is the whole question of who do you go to for advice and mentorship and that type of thing. Who do you, especially at this point in your career, who do you actually go to and have a beer, or just say, look, this is the problem we're running into? Any advice? Who do you talk to?
I will answer that quick. There's a chat question that says,
Oh, okay.
Do you want to do them now or do you want them later?
No, we'll only have a few more minutes of this, and then then we'll bring on the peanut gallery. Yeah.
There are 3 lessons I learned very early on, actually. I mean, at this point in the business, honestly, I'm a member of a lot of the Facebook groups. There's the IT business owners group, the IT/MSP entrepreneurs group, and these have thousands of people in them. And I do use those. I learn a little bit, at least in terms of like, somebody who say, what solution do you use for this problem? And somebody say, this software is really good and I've never heard of it. And maybe it's cool, right? So that I do use it for that. Again, we're a little bit different. The way we bill, the way we price, it's generally completely different from the way everybody else does it. It's really worked for us. We've been very successful with it. So, I mean, that's just kind of a learned thing. I certainly learned quite a bit more earlier on. And we've run our business under these 3 things. And so somebody once told me, number 1, if you're thinking of firing somebody, you should have already done it. Okay. If you're thinking about it, you should have already done it. It's too late. You just go and do it. Under promise, over deliver, and distrust, verify, and stay suspicious. And you'll recognize those because they're all from early videos from 8-9 years ago. And I've actually used those every day, every year, and they've worked quite well. If I had to pick one, I would say under promise, over deliver. That's the big one. Don't promise something you can't follow through on, and promise less and do better, and people will get really happy with that. The best way to build a good client relationship is to wow them, for lack of a better term, and that's one way you can do it.
Okay, cool. Then final question for right now, then we'll get to the peanut gallery. Out of curiosity, what oddities have come up in this post-COVID world? So we all talk about COVID, and COVID has changed everything. Like, I had zero interest in doing any of this crap until COVID screwed up my plans. Like, What about COVID and the COVID situation is unusual? Like, is something unusual that you've been running into? Any kind of weird problems?
Um, I don't know. I mean, we're a little insulated up here, right? So we didn't have a lot of cases. Like we didn't have an outbreak actually until like June. We didn't really have an outbreak, right? Until June, we had less than 100 um, cases, right? And very few deaths. I mean, any deaths suck, obviously, but very few. So we were basically shut down as an economy at the very beginning. So in March, April, we were basically shut down. Restaurants were shut down. You couldn't go dine in, that kind of stuff. Slowly, everything opened up with some restrictions. We had a mask mandate and that kind of thing, and that hasn't. I mean, we're basically back to normal now. There's no mask mandates. There's no isolation requirements. Everything's basically 100% capacity now. We have the largest. Let me pull the number up. And I think this is important to this conversation because it shows you how you can get out of the problem, right? Because a lot of places are not like this right now. We are. It's just loading. There was a little bit of balancing early on. I mean, we went obviously to a remote first method of support. We will not go on site unless we absolutely have to. We walked clients through doing a whole lot more than they normally would. Here, let me, not coming up there. Let me just pull it up on this computer and then I can share it with you. Yeah, so I mean, we had probably 2 months, I'd say, of where we were really careful with where we went and that kind of thing. After that, it's pretty much back to normal. Most people are back in the office, certainly in private sector. It's pretty normal. Travel is tough, right? So like I said, with our office down on Vancouver Island, obviously that became more difficult to get back and forth. Just, as a function of travel was more difficult to do, and isolation requirements and all that kind of fun stuff. But otherwise, nothing's really been too weird. And again, this is it's unique just because of our area, I think. Here, if you want to show that picture.
Yeah, I think that's one of the you're like 75% vax. Oh, you're 85%.
We're no more. If you look at the Yukon and you look at that middle column, eligible 12 plus, because you can't count the people who are under 12 who can't get a vaccine. We're at 97% vaccinated. Like we're open. The vast majority of Yukoners went and got their vaccines. I mean, I've had mine since January. We just all got vaccinated and we're done, right? I mean, we're just basically open. I know this is a contentious thing, especially in some US states where people just don't want to, right? It's become a political thing. And I mean, I don't look at it as a political thing. Most Yukoners don't. Again, 97% of us who are allowed to get a vaccine went and got it. That's it. I mean, we're just basically open to regular life again, which is great, I'm quite happy about that.
That's cool. So for politically, you're not worried about, because Trudeau, you guys just went through this whole election process because he wants to push the vaccine mandate. So for you, that's not a big issue.
I'm good with it, to be honest. I don't have an issue with that. I mean, when I actually know people who have had surgeries for cancer canceled because the hospital is full with COVID patients. And the vast majority of those, 90% plus, are unvaccinated. So, I have strong opinions on that. I've had a family member die from the virus as well. So, I mean, this is like, I understand this personally. So yeah, I don't have a lot of patience for that. It's a shot in the arm. I got them, right? we're coming up not that far away from a year of having it. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's a good thing. I think it's great that we have this vaccine. I don't know why it's a contentious political thing. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, so with that, I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves and we can start taking questions. Okay, so hopefully that button works. Joel, is Joel still there? You want to ask your question? Unmute yourself and ask your question. There you
Oh, can you hear me?
go.
Yep.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, excellent. So this is probably a bit off track, but I was just listening earlier about the hundreds of dollars just for DSL, and it makes me wonder if being remote enough to suffer those high internet access costs, has this prompted a disproportionate amount of localized solutions among people who live there, such as mesh Wi-Fi within town, or ham packet radio, that sort of thing?
Short answer, no. And that is because you don't get, like, it's most of our packages. We just recently in the last few months got unlimited internet options. That was not an option previous to that. When you're only getting, like on that DSL package, when you're only getting 325 gigs, that doesn't move a lot of Netflix traffic. So sharing your internet with your neighbor is not something you really want to do for that reason. So short answer is no. I don't see more of that than I would anywhere else.
Okay. I thought maybe I was kind of thinking more along lines of a decentralized sort of community in that sort of sense. Be able to communicate amongst the Yukon, as opposed to going back to the Netflix mothership and stuff like that.
No, not really. I mean, we adopt cloud services like Netflix and Disney Plus and all that, just the same like everybody else. Probably use it a little bit less just because of those caps. But yeah, no, not at all.
Fair. Thanks.
No worries.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, like, I know in the U.S., I've known people that run, was it WISP, the internet service, the wireless internet service provider things,
Wisp, yep.
and there's what is it? It's called CLEX. Like we have fiber optic lines that go into almost every city, and you may have to pay a crap ton to tie into it, but there are abilities to tie into those fiber lines, basically to create your own. You guys don't have that kind of thing there.
Short answer, we have one fiber line currently that goes into the Yukon from down south. It's owned by the Monopoly ISP. They are building a second one going north and making a loop through our neighboring territory, but it will also, it's a public-private partnership between the government and the Monopoly ISP. Government's bankrolling a large part of it. It's like an $80 million project. But the bottom line is the Monopoly ISP controls pricing, the wholesale pricing costs. They are regulated. So they're regulated by the federal entity, the CRTC, the Canadian Radio and Telecommunications Commission. But the bottom line is the wholesale costs are so expensive that to tie in and purchase wholesale bandwidth means you need to charge more than they do to the end user. So it's basically, the end result is you can't come in cheaper because of the cost of wholesale bandwidth. That's the problem.
That's a hell of a game right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Weird. Is it George? George Prito? You have your hand up. There we go.
It's Jorge.
Jorge. Okay. Jorge. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Martin, I had a quick question for you. What's the process for you when you're increasing prices for your customers? And there's several types of, I guess, increases. There might be you're passing on the cost of, a cost increase, like Microsoft 365 is going up in price yet again. Or it might be, what do you call it? Quality of life, I guess, or cost of life, I think it's called, increase or any kind of increase. How do you usually handle that when you're passing that on to your clients?
Sure. So like I said, the vast majority of what we do is an hourly rate, right? when we've had to do increases. So our hourly rate's gone up from obviously when we first started. When we first started, we had a much cheaper hourly rate. That was to attract clients, grow the business, blah, 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 right? We are still the cheapest, one of the cheapest hourly rates in the industry locally, which I'm proud to say. That being said, yes, I mean, when costs have gone up, it's pretty simple. We just let all of our clients know costs going up by this much. I've always kept it down to $5 an hour. So I tell everybody, you know, okay, here was the old rate. That I'll let you know. I mean, we started at $85 an hour. That's what we started at back in the day. When that went up, I said, okay, everybody, it's going to be $90 an hour starting next month. Nobody really cared too much. Again, we're one of the cheaper ones in the industry. One of our main competitors, who doesn't exist anymore because they are a business that we ended up purchasing a number of years ago. They were our largest competitor at that time. They were charging $165 an hour, and not a lot of clients were batting too much of an eye at it. So you can understand we're on the lower end of the spectrum anyways. So nobody cares. The biggest thing is like with price increases, you know, when 365 goes up in price, I mean, we make a margin on 365. So minor differences like in what we pay don't really affect that too much. So I don't think we'll change our pricing at that with this increase. But I mean, the bottom line is you have to have good relationships with your clients. If you have good relationships with your clients and they trust you, and you know you've had these for years, small price differences won't make too much of a difference. If you double your price, obviously that's going to be a problem. You have to go marginal. You have to step it, right? So you know if you're at $80 an hour and you want to get to 120, you can't say, okay, we're going from 80 to like 110. Like that's too much of a jump, right? You have to ratchet it up slowly. So, you know, that's fair to them for sure. Fair for you. I mean, you don't want to double your price really quickly or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's all about relationships, right? We have a 97.7% client retention rate over the entire 11 years we've been operating, 11 plus years. Our original client, our very first client to this day remains our client. So, I mean, we have a relationship with them that quite frankly surpasses most of the staff that are there. There's very few staff that have been there that long. So there's a trust relationship there, right? Like if we say, okay, we need to replace the server, here's the price. Basically what we get back is, yes, okay, go ahead and do it. Why is it like that? Well, again, because we have that relationship. We've been there for so long. We've always taken care of them. They've never had major problems. We're always there if they have an issue. Yeah, that's kind of the big thing. It all comes down to relationships.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
So that's one thing, Martin, I was wondering is I ran into somebody that had been a startup founder, startup failed, went back to being a consultant, and he was doing gangbusters. He was making so much money. And I looked at him, I was like, really? You're making that much money swapping hard drives? And he said, no, it's all partnership programs. So basically he was selling Comcast internet and backup services and Office 365. And he was making so much money doing that he literally said he was essentially giving away his labor. Do you guys make much money off of partner programs?
Yeah, I mean, if we're reselling, like obviously, like there's margin that you want to make if you're reselling 365, anything you're selling. I mean, if you sell an on-premise server, you want to make margin on the hardware. If you are selling a 365 license for hosted email, you want to make margin on that subscription. If you're selling endpoint protection, and the old antivirus, I call it endpoint protection because that's what you should be buying now. You know, you want to make a margin on that. Sure. I mean, you have to decide what your margin is, and then some of this is regional, right? What will your market bear, right?
Well, no, but but the thing is, like with him, this was actually partner programs, like with so it was insane. Like for business class services, he would get like $500 when they signed the contract, and then he would get a residual. He would get like
like a dealer, yeah. No, that's not really a thing here. See, that's a big ISP thing. ISPs don't do that here. Not just our monopoly one, but even ones down south. They don't really do that. That kind of agent thing is, it's not really that big of a thing in our, at least in our industry here.
Okay. So the other folks on the line, Ben, Mr. Jacob, do you guys have any questions? They've fallen asleep. Anybody who wants to join the meetup, or join the Zoom call, down below the video, there's a little link. You can click on that, and you can join the Zoom call, and you can ask a question if you'd like to do that, or I'll just keep asking some random questions of Martin. But he is here to answer your questions. Dragged him here, so I don't know. Nope. Okay. So here's one of my things. I find this fascinating, and I think this is awesome from like a technology business standpoint, and it's that weird thing flipping behind your head. Can you talk about your wife's business?
Yeah, I mean, my wife's in technology as well, because that's what it is. My wife owns a 3D ultrasound studio. It's called I Spy Baby 3D Ultrasound. It's interesting. It's a service that we don't have in the Yukon, or didn't have up until now. I mean, it's been around down south for many years. We would have done it with our son, but when we were traveling, the timing wasn't right. So it was a business idea that we fired up. It's operated out of like this office, which I occupy. As well. So, because most of what she does is on the weekend and after hours when people aren't at work. So that kind of works out. We share the office space. But yeah, I mean, that's honestly a technology company just the same. I mean, the ultrasound.
Can you explain what it is?
Yeah. So it's 3D, I'll move. It's 3D imaging of what a baby looks like in the womb, right? So at different stages of a pregnancy, you can image the baby, the fetus, and then print out pictures, and we give videos if people want videos and things like that. So the machine that's used, the ultrasound machine, I mean, it's nothing more than a laptop with a bunch of software on it. I mean, it's a GE. It's we went with the recognized world gold standard in ultrasound. So it's a General Electric machine. It basically looks like a laptop, and it runs Windows XP. Runs Windows XP embedded, and that's the current. That's not an old machine. I don't want to say it's an old machine. That's the current OS that thing runs, right? So it runs Windows XP embedded, and it's basically just software rendering. That's all it is, right? So, I mean, that is a tech business in the end. It is. It's a little bit different than what we probably think of a tech business, but
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like that because it's using a technology product to provide people services, but definitely in a way most people don't even consider.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of that convergence of technology we talk about, right? I mean, video surveillance is an IP camera. I mean, it's not really any different than an IP phone or an IP computer. I mean, it's all run on Ethernet, right? There's an Ethernet port in the back of this ultrasound machine. That's how we get the photos and videos off. So yeah.
That's cool. How does she decide to do that bit? Like, how do you even... if I was sitting here spitballing ideas for businesses, that would not have even come up on my list. How did she come up with the idea?
I don't know how we came up with it, to be honest. It just kind of occurred one day, just kind of sitting there, and hey, we should start something like this on the side. Yeah, that's what came out of that.
Fair enough. So one of the things we talked about years ago is you were talking about you were using nukes, the next unit computers from Intel for your servers. Are you still doing that for servers, and how do you like it?
Oh yeah, let me see here. Hang on, be right back.
Yeah. Okay, and again, for anybody at home, if you want to join the Zoom call, there's a link to the Zoom call down in the description. Again, the entire point, I am bringing tech professionals to you so you can ask freaking questions. So if you don't ask questions, come on now. So if you want to join the Zoom call, click on the link down below.
Yeah, so these guys, this is one of the original ones. This is the old IYE model, so people get an idea of how large these things are. Yes, this is still our standard go-to for server deployments. For probably 90% of our clients have these as servers. Most people laugh at me when they see that. Here's the thing, they're low power. So when I talk about low power and return on investment, these things eat like 18 watts roughly of power. Your Dell server will eat 550 or 750, depending on what kind of power supply. You can do the math on how much a kilowatt of electricity costs. I've done the math. I can tell you that just from the power savings, you will generally pay for these. And they're reliable. I mean, we've got hundreds of these out there. a very, very low failure rate. Again, we plan for 4-year life expectancy. I don't try to run these things for a decade. That would kind of be stupid, I think, but you have a 4-year life expectancy and you roll it over into new hardware at that point. Our failure rate is very, very, very low. I'm trying to think. 1 or 2 failures probably in all the years we've been using these, like just true, like just failed for no reason. Most of the failures we do encounter are from power problems, power blips, power outages, brownouts, whatever. Power does kill a few of them sometimes. But that being said, again, they're cheap, they're disposable, they're fast. I mean, they run everything. This particular one, well, not this one, but one of the other ones I have in my desk is, it's an i7. It's an i7, 64 gigs of RAM in it, a 2 terabyte SSD, and it runs like, I want to say 5 virtual machines, Windows Server 2019s. Runs them just fine. I mean, that was about 100 user client. So there's 100 users using Active Directory. There was an SQL server on there. Exchange was on there, on-prem Exchange. Yeah, like they run everything. Like this concept that you need crazy computing power to run Exchange, or I've had people tell me you can't run Exchange without 128 gigs of RAM. I know Microsoft says that in their requirements on paper, but you got to understand they're putting that there because they're assuming you're going to have like 1,000 users or 2,000 users on their Exchange on there.
Hold on a second. Sorry, go. Yeah.
Nope, no worries.
We'll get to Lyle in a second. Yep. So just finish off that.
But yeah, no, it's there is this concept of overbuilding in the IT world. There's a lot of that, and it's not. Yeah, I don't know. It happens a lot where people overbuild infrastructure and roll it out, and you don't need to these days. It's not like that. You don't need 8 rack servers for 20 users, right? Like that's not a thing anymore. That was a thing back in the 90s. I'm sure you remember racking servers for offices. That was totally normal. But these days, no. I mean, to be clear, I have one of these, a more modern version, supporting our largest private sector client, which is over 300 users. Really? And it's been running for 4 years. So anybody who wants to say like, oh, you're going to have problems, it's been running for 4 years. Not a problem, not a complaint from anybody. So, I mean, these things work, right? A lot of people get stuck into that academic mindset, okay, server, I have to buy this enterprise Dell. That's the only server you can buy. It's not actually true. I mean, hardware back in the day, this isn't the 90s anymore, right? Hardware is pretty reliable. Hardware doesn't just fail for no reason. That's not a thing anymore.
Okay, cool. So Lyle, do you want to pop on, ask your question? You got a question?
No, I just listening to the conversation. I find Martin very, very practical in regards to managing northern clients, and just operating in a very practical and understanding way when it comes to remote services and communication clients. Because again, in the south, you can drive 30 minutes and you can be in another town. In the north, you got to drive 12 hours, or 5 hours to get to another location. That's population density is not like United States. Northern communities are hours and hours away, and just listening to Martin talk about he knows what he's talking about when dealing with northern clients. I find it very
good. Are you up in the north? Are you in the Yukon or such?
Well, I'm in the Northwest Territories in Yellowknife, and what we do is we what Martin does and what I do are very similar, but what I do is I do mainly fiber optic communications, layer 1 technologies. I do aerial underground installs. I do point-to-point, multi-point. A lot of the layer 1 hard work. For what Martin does. I hand over that network to somebody else, and I build it and I hand it over. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Good deal. Okay. So anybody else? Ben, Joel, or I don't know. I think you said Mr.
I'll ask a
Jacob.
question.
Okay, there we go. Yep.
Hi, Martin. I'm Ben. Just wondering, what was one of the most challenging problems you've had to solve for a client?
Challenging problems to solve. I'll touch on two things actually, because it's two different topics. One is working around, for example, the high cost of internet, right? So if you've got a client with one office on one side of the street, an office on the other side of the street, how do you hook them up? Right? The traditional way would be get internet in both spots, get two firewalls, build a VPN tunnel, be done with it. Cost wise, especially ongoing recurring cost wise, where I am, that's not really feasible for a lot of people. So we started looking at things like wireless bridges and things like that. So kind of that's an interesting thing to deal with. We do also have clients, like I said, we have some municipalities as clients, things like SCADA. So when you've got a municipal, let's say, water treatment facility, and you have different endpoints. So you've got the treatment facility, and then you've got like pump houses over here. And again, not feasible to bring services to these areas. In most cases, there aren't services, right? So how do you deal with hooking those endpoints up so they can talk to the SCADA system? Is that going to be done through a fiber optic network, or which generally that's not feasible? So do you do wireless through the air? How do you secure that? There's all kinds of that sort of fun stuff, off the grid kind of thing, if you will. The other thing I would say would be going into clients where things have been overbuilt and things are a mess. I mean, this isn't unique to the North per se, but I mean, I'm sure Eli's seen this many times, and I'm sure the rest of you have as well, where you go into a new client and you're like, okay, nothing's labeled, nothing's documented. What's going on here? This is out of date. This they don't have a license for. Nobody knows anything. The last IT guy handled it all. So that's certainly always the most challenging thing, for sure.
Cool. Okay, so we have a final person that came in, Ray Ant. If Mr. Ant has a question, now is the time to ask the question.
Hey Martin, it's Ray here.
Hey.
What's the biggest project that you're working on currently?
Biggest project I'm working on currently. I would say we're doing a network overhaul for one client who probably has, I don't actually know, 100, 125 users probably. This is actually one of those messy ones where, we walked in and you guys are still using Exchange 2003. That hasn't been current for many, many years. So yeah, that's probably the largest project we have right now on the table. And actually, I totally glanced over this. We have a contract from a national provider to move the government of the Yukon over to VoIP. So they've been using Centrix for many, many years, an analog phone service. They just decided finally they are going to move to VoIP. I personally think many years too late, but they are now moving to VoIP. So we have 4,400 desktop phones to deploy across numerous communities, including ones that are fly-in only. So we will be taking, 100 of those phones on an airplane, 4 or 5 hours to a fly-in only community and deploying them.
Wow. And you're like, how many employees do you have in your company currently?
We're currently sit at 10. We generally have a complement of 12. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work for those 10 employees.
It's not bad, actually. I mean, a lot of workflow, and I find a lot of IT business owners specifically, but business owners in general. The way we're able to do all this work with the amount of staff that we have is because everything we do is standardized. Okay. Our IP scheme that we use at clients is generally the same at every client. So a server is always going to be at the same IP. The firewall is always going to be at the same IP. There's things you can standardize, there's things you can't, obviously, for security reasons and such. But what you can standardize, you should standardize. That way, everything's the same everywhere, and somebody doesn't have to figure out, okay, they can't print to the main printer. Well, the main printer is at the same IP for the vast majority of our clients. So nobody has to go look up the documentation to find out what that IP is. They already know what it is because it's the same as the last client they helped who had a printing problem. So standardization and kind of figuring out that workflow is the number one thing for any business, but especially somebody in an IT business. Once you figure that out, if you can replicate the same thing over and over again, we have hundreds of these out there as servers, right? I mean, they all operate the same. Obviously, the clients aren't the same; they're doing different things, but they all operate the same. So, if you can replicate that over and over and over again, and have a standardization and have a template, that's the biggest thing.
That's nice. And when you were decided to start your company, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced up to this point with your company?
This is more regional, but staffing is certainly hard because our labor pool is very small here. But that's a very regional thing. In most larger areas, especially metropolitan areas, staffing is not really that much of a concern. You'll be able to get local resumes. It's not really an issue, but that's a concern. The other thing is just being patient. I mean, I can tell you for the first 3 years, I want to say 3 years. I mean, we had 5 clients, maybe. I mean, we had one client for the very first year in business. We might have only had one client. I forget exactly when the second one came on board, but we grew very organically. We didn't force things. We didn't push out a bunch of marketing. We didn't go solicit work, anything like that. We let it grow very organically. And when you do that, it gives yourself some time so you can make adjustments. Something doesn't work right. Okay, let's adjust it. That very first client, I learned a lot in terms of standardization, like what I just said. And what kind of solutions you can deploy, what works, what doesn't work. When I deployed my first IP phone system, which was for that first client, the vendor told me you must run Ethernet, dedicated Ethernet just for the phone. You cannot use the onboard switch. They do come with onboard switches, but run dedicated Ethernet for each phone back to the server closet. So I did. You don't have to do that. Our largest VoIP deployment in private sector is about, I want to say 381 extensions. Not a single one of them has a dedicated Ethernet run back to a server room. They all run with their onboard switch to the computer that's there. And it's never been an issue. And that's been running for years and years and years. So you learn a lot in those early years. So that's why I would say, it's challenging if you let something grow organically. Obviously, you're not making a ton of money. I made below the poverty line, I think, in my first year in business. I didn't make any money. Thankfully, my wife made a little bit more money than me. But I didn't make a lot of money, but I learned a lot, right? I learned a lot about what works, what doesn't work, how you can build a workflow, how you can standardize. And then I was able to replicate that. So when we had years of larger growth, it's easy. You can go in and you can just replicate what you know works elsewhere. You're not spending time messing around trying to figure that out when you have a bunch of work in front of you.
Oh, nice. Interesting. Okay, well, what project are you most proud of completing at your company?
Most proud of completing? That's an interesting one. Probably, so that largest client I just told you about, where we have the largest private sector phone system in the territory, we're 384 phones. That particular client, so they have multiple offices, and in different buildings here in town. And it was kind of a mess when we came on. Different physical offices had different servers with different things on them. One office had Hyper-V, one office had VMware. One office was doing backups, one office wasn't doing backups. Like, it was just a gigantic mess. We basically tore everything out. We purchased what's called an EMAN circuit, Ethernet Metropolitan Area Network circuit, from the ISP. So basically what this is in short, what it is it's basically an Ethernet cable from one building to another building using the ISP's infrastructure, right? It actually goes back to their central office, and there's a lot of back-end stuff. But the gist of it is you are purchasing the equivalent of an Ethernet cable from one building to another. So we purchased EMAN circuits at all of their buildings, built out a local server infrastructure in their main building. Everybody's using it. It's one gigantic local LAN. That's it. We basically took, I don't know, it was dozens of servers and virtual machines, and we cut it down to like 4, with, a handful of hardware. Wasn't crazy at all. But it cleaned everything up. I mean, reliability went up, usability went up, ease of administration went up. I mean, we probably cut the administrative time, I don't know, at least in half, maybe more, by doing that. So yeah, that was a really cool project.
Oh, nice. That's cool. All right, one last one. What are some of the first things to know about configuring a server, like maybe a file server or a web server? Is it really as complicated as it seems, or is it pretty basic in terms of technicality?
It's fairly straightforward. You do have to know what you're doing. It's these days, I mean, again, as Eli will know, the MCSE was the gold standard of learning this back in the day. It was great because the MCSE was a package where you just learned everything. All of that's parceled out now, right? So, one should do a little bit of education. I'm not saying you have to go and get a certificate per se or something, but you should get a little bit of education, learn about it, and then you should practice it yourself. Start a home lab, fire up some virtual machines, start configuring it. I mean, you can download Windows Server for free. The evaluation version is good for 6 months, comes with a 6-month license, and you can configure it and play with it and do everything you want. You break it, oh well, just delete it and reinstall it again. A lot of it's experience, right? So there is some education you should do. There's lots of resources on YouTube. There's lots of you can go on a Udemy course. You can actually go for a certification if you want to spend a little more money. I'm not going to necessarily say one way is better than the other, but you certainly should inform yourself and learn, but also do it yourself. Practice it in your own lab, and that's in your home, wherever. Actually do it, right?
Awesome. All right, Martin, it was nice talking to you.
For sure. Yeah, you bet.
All right, so we'll wrap up with the final 2 questions then, since we've had you for 2 hours already. So actually, something from the chat the chat section that I think is an interesting thing to ask is your ticketing and invoicing system. What do you guys use? Do you guys use something off the shelf?
Invoicing and ticketing is not the same system for us. Our ticketing system, we've had the ticketing system for quite a few years, but all it is a ticketing system. We use that to basically track requests that come in. So when a request comes in, our techs will put it in the system, and then they'll make notes on it, and they'll close it out with whatever the hours were. That's all it does. That's all we use it for. I manually go through every single one of those tickets to take a look at it myself, so I understand what's going on. This is super important, that I find a lot of IT business owners lose sight of, is as they scale, they start not paying attention to the work that's going on. I pay attention. So if a client asks me, hey, last week, so-and-so did this, it's not working or whatever, I generally have an idea of what happened last week because I've seen the ticket. I've read it. I've read the resolution notes, understand what's going on. This is super important because as you get clients who aren't tiny offices where 3 people are there, you're going to get things where a manager of an employee says, we requested this last week, it wasn't done. I know in my head, yeah, we got that. We contacted the user. The user told us, I can't do it right now. I will call you back. and never called us back. I know this, and I can tell that manager whatever that, right? So now that manager goes, oh, what's going on? He goes to their employee and goes, oh, you didn't tell me that part, right? These are important things to know, because this, as I've said before, and this is valid across any business, not just IT, it's all about relationships. So the relationships we have with our clients is all based on trust. So when a boss, manager, whatever of a client comes with a problem, I have some history on what that is already. So I go through all the tickets regularly. I look at them. I just glance them over. I don't have to study them or anything. I understand them. Invoicing is completely separate, right? So we use Sage Accounting for our invoicing. All invoicing happens through there. It is not automated. It is manual. So part of the reason why that is manual, it's manual, but I mean, it's not a lot of time really, right? Like I can run reports out of the ticketing system to say, XYZ clients spend 20 hours. Okay, I know to invoice in 20 hours. But again, I go through every single ticket. So when I invoice something, I am sure on the hours. We do very, very little invoice adjustments because everything we bill is real. It's legit. I've seen it. I've gone through the ticket. It makes sense to me. If there are times where I will go through the tickets and I'll see something like somebody did a password reset and that tech billed an hour. They might have done that by mistake. They weren't really thinking, but I go, okay, password reset. I'm pulling that out. We're not billing that. So it's also kind of a second level of verification on our end. So we don't send out invoicing that's incorrect. The last thing you want to do is send out invoicing that's incorrect to somebody. That's a relationship killer, if nothing else, right? So I look at everything. I know what it is. And then invoicing goes to our accounting system, which is not IT specific.
Okay. So with your ticketing system, just out of curiosity, it sounds pretty simple. Would you want something more complicated? Like the last one I used for business was something called Kayako, which although it was a software as a service, it had an insane amount of customizations. So I could do entire workflows for different types of tickets coming in. You could do all kinds of stuff. Would you want something more complicated, or are you happy with a pretty simple solution?
No, happy with what we got. I looked at workflows and that kind of thing, SLAs and this kind of thing. No, I mean, we're pretty straightforward. Our staff all know, look, you can prioritize a little bit. If a client needs a new user added, but the user is not starting work for a week, okay, it doesn't have to be done right away. If the user calls and says, my phone system's down, obviously you got to deal with that right away. They all understand how to triage that kind of thing pretty quickly. And when we just get things done for clients, like I've always said with the staff, you get a lot of leeway, get a lot of autonomy, but we got to service our clients, right? We have a 45-minute response time. That's something that we have. When a client requests something of us, they will get a response in 45 minutes. We're pretty on top of that. Sometimes it goes a bit longer, but generally speaking, we are on top of that and we get back to people. The biggest complaint I've heard from clients, and the number one thing that has caused us to gain new clients, is I made a request and they just never did it, or it took them days to action on it, right? So if you're calling your IT provider and saying like, hey, I can't print, and you don't see somebody for 3 days, they go and they try and find somebody else. So our thing is we action on things right away, we triage them properly, and that's it. We just provide good service to clients. That's the number one thing. You just provide good service. Doesn't matter if you're an electrician, doesn't matter if you're an IT service provider, doesn't matter if you're detailing their cars, just provide good service, right?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So now this is going to be the most important question of your entire career. You're on YouTube, so how you answer this will determine a lot. What is your daily driver? What is the main computer that you use to do work?
Oh, what do I use to do my own work in my office? I use a NUC as well. I use an Intel NUC. Usually I'm using, I'm not always on the current edition of the NUC. I think this one's probably about 3 years old, but I use a NUC. We use the exact same, our own in-house server is also a NUC. I use our phone system. Show you. This is a Grand Stream system. This is the same stuff that we deploy for clients. Everything that we deploy for clients is what we use in-house, and that's on purpose because one, we're familiar with it and it forces us to use it as well. and also then we're confident in what the solution is. I mean, if it works for us, there's no reason it shouldn't work for anybody else.
So with that, so I'm guessing it's Windows or Microsoft on those.
Yep. Windows 10 for me. Yep.
So what are your thoughts then on Linux? Like, one of the things I've been surprised doing this whole educational thing for 10 years, I foreshadowed that by 2020 we would all be on Linux by now and Windows would be part of the past. What are your thoughts on Linux as like a daily driver, a desktop machine, migrating more people to them, to Linux?
Nope, won't happen. We actually, one of my competitors is actually a big Linux fan and deploys a lot of Linux solutions. Really nice guy. Actually, I have beers with him every so often. We're very friendly. The problem with, the thing is, what I find is a lot of us look at these things as professionals, as people who are well-versed, well-literate, they'll say, with these technologies. The average person, quite frankly, like the average user can barely use Windows, right? They're familiar with Windows, they know how to play with it, but I can't tell you the amount of times we've been asked, can you change my default printer? I mean, this is a pretty simple thing to change, right? But people don't know. So people are comfortable with Windows. They understand Windows. They know how to use it, how to navigate, how to open things. They don't want to learn something else. They just don't, right? I mean, that was the whole thing with Windows 8, right? I mean, I actually liked Windows 8. I didn't mind Windows 8. I liked the start screen, but that small change of a start screen from a start menu was so drastically different for the average user. They didn't like it, and it crashed and failed, right? But that's just a function of we're in this every day and it's kind of our thing. So we're okay. Like we think it's kind of cool to transition to Linux. And I'm not saying Linux is a problem. I mean, we have Linux machines out there on server backends and things like that. I don't have anything against Linux at all. It's just, I don't think users will ever be there. It's people are used to Windows. They know Windows. They want to keep going with Windows. That's just the bottom line.
Fair enough. And then the final one. So all the young folks out there that want to get into computers, what would be your advice for an 18-year-old right now that wants to get into technology?
You've got to be diversified. Like I see people who are like, I want to really learn Active Directory, and that's it. I just want to do Active Directory. And it's like, well, there's not a lot of jobs for an Active Directory administrator. There used to be jobs for people who managed phone systems in large enterprises. All they did was deal with phone systems and change extensions and reset voicemail passwords. It's not really a thing anymore, right? You have to be willing to deal with the convergence of a technology, right? You have to be willing to fix an IP phone, put up a IP surveillance camera, and fix the printer. Like, you have to be willing to do all of it. I don't think there's a lot of space anymore for niche kind of things. Like, that's what I say in the cybersecurity world, right? If you have a certificate or a degree in cybersecurity, if you go and do the Harvard University program I did for cybersecurity, and that's it, maybe you'll get a job, but really you should be a systems admin, right? You should have experience working with all these platforms and systems, and then layer and add cybersecurity on top. That's really what you should be doing. So if you want to get into this profession, you have to be willing to dabble in lots of different things. And quite frankly, that includes, you got to have some kind of an understanding of coding, scripting. If you can learn languages, great. I mean, I know HTML, I've known it for years. One of my staff members knows Ruby on Rails. That's their thing. All that's great to have. I'm not saying you have to go and learn a bunch of languages and know them in and out. Certainly there's lots of jobs in that right now, but you should have a little bit of an understanding of all of them, right? You should be able to do something in Node.js or whatever. That kind of thing's important. So it's kind of that. I don't really like the term because the perception of what that term is, I don't really like, but it's kind of that jack of all trades thing. You have to be able to do more than just one thing. If you want to get into IT and all you want to do is admin Active Directory, don't bother. There's nothing in that for you. You got to understand a lot more than that.
Wow. Okay, good place to leave this off in. Thank you then. So thank you for coming. It's been a good time here. So anybody that's still watching this, do remember I'm posting these things on Meetup now. So if you want to become part of the whole office hours thing, every week, maybe more than a couple times a week, I want people like Martin on. So again, he can shatter your dreams. I don't have to. So join the meetup, and then when you join the meetup, you'll get the Zoom information. And just like with Lyle or Ray Ant or any of these other people that ask questions, then you'll be able to ask questions on the show. And again, you can get the answer from somebody else. So you get different people's opinions. So with that is the show. Peanut is very I don't know, spastic for some reason. So I will put her down.